Hello everyone, I'm Psychotic and that's also my screen name. Today we're taking a look at weapons and which ones are right for you. Unfortunately, that's not really a question I can answer, but before you leave complaining about clickbait and all that, let me explain that we're actually going to do an in-depth exploration of weapon stats in the hopes that you can answer the question yourself by the end of this. Ultimately, your loadout is a profoundly personal thing. What feels good for you, what you like to play with, what kind of roleplay you want to do. Some of you are watching the background footage of me dogfighting and thinking I'm doing well. Some of you are wondering why you should listen to me after such a poor performance. Everyone plays this game differently, but today we're going to look at all of the weapons, their DPS, both shields, hull, and the totals, by faction and by size. I've added chapters to the video to make it a little bit easier to skip around to the sections you're interested in, and for those of you that don't care about math or certain factions, it'll make it easier for you to revisit if there's something you want to look at again later. Now, I do want to point out my preferences and the changes I made in my loadouts based on the math as we go through this, and I'll likely try and sway you to my point of view. I never claim to be objective. But whether you want the highest numbers possible, or you want the easiest to use, or the least maintenance weapons, ultimately the choice is yours to make. If you learned anything useful today, or have a good time, please don't be afraid to drop a like. If you're feeling friendly, maybe go ahead and subscribe, but either way, let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, and just as a heads up, flashbang warning for those of you that are watching in the dark. Alright, so here we have a list of all the weapons in the game with some exceptions. So I moved the batteries to their own tab down here, as you can see. I also removed all the Mark 1 weapons where there's a Mark 2 variant, just because it's better and we're less likely to use the Mark 1 in that case. I also removed the mining drills because, well, yeah, I mean, they're mining drills. You're not going to use them for combat unless you're doing it for the memes. And then I removed a bunch of the timeline-specific weapons, like the electromagnetic and whatnot, just because it's not something you can get in the normal sandbox. And for those of you that are interested, I separated them by faction. So if you only have access to one faction, you can see what you might want to pull until you can get access to the other factions. The other thing behind that is if you want to stay faction specific, or if you're doing a faction loyalty kind of a playthrough, then you can actually see what's going to work for your faction. Now, as far as the math goes, the damage is raw. So we've got shield and hull damage here. And this is straight out of the encyclopedia in the game. Rogues, which we use for the universe map quite frequently, has a list of weapons in there, and it has pretty much all of the weapons in the game. I did notice some discrepancies in some of the total DPSs that he had going on, or whomever. I'm sure it's more of a wiki than it is a single guy running it. I noticed a handful of discrepancies, and that might be the combat update, or it might be something like somebody fat-fingered a number. So I wound up doing the numbers myself out of the encyclopedia just so that I can be sure that they're up to date with 8.0. The other thing is he did not have the shield damage and the hull damage broken out in his list of weapons, so that's kind of important, as you'll see when we get into this a little bit more. You don't want to find the highest DPS weapon and find out that it only works on shields, kind of a deal. Now, as far as the DPS number, the total DPS here is actually the raw times the fire rate, or rate of fire, and then times the cooldown ratio, which is here. So the cooldown ratio is the fire time before overheat divided by the fire time before overheat plus total cooldown. So that's your cooldown delay plus your cooldown duration, so for your full cooldown cycle. So this ratio includes the damage and then how long it takes through an entire cycle for our total DPS, instead of just our raw DPS, which would be a little bit different because it doesn't have the cooldown baked into it. And we want to know with the cooldowns because that makes a very big difference in some of these numbers. Now, as far as our colors go, OpenOffice calls this color salmon. I know it's very hard to read, and I apologize for that. The ones in salmon are ones that do not swivel. So they don't track the little circle in front of the ship. You have to line up your shot precisely. And a lot of them, in cases like the boson lance, the ones that don't swivel, are mostly used for, at least as far as players go, for taking out surface elements on capital ships. They are fantastic at that. And some of them actually have a little bit of shield pass-through and bonus damage to components, surface components. The blue means that it deals more damage to shields than it does to hull. The green means that it deals the same damage to shields and hull. The red means that it deals more damage to hull than shields. And the purple means that it has an AoE effect added onto it. The yellow ones are the ones that all require ammunition, so it's your missile launchers, etc. This is all of them blooped together, basically. And then we've got them separated out, so you're going to see a lot of repeats. As you can see, the missiles almost always dominate the DPS, but I don't like to use missiles because I don't like to have to maintain them. I know with the resupply ships it's not a huge deal, but sometimes the traders for the resupply ships go a little derpy, and I just don't like dealing with it. The only exception that I'll make for that are the torpedo launchers, because a cadre of torpedo launching guys can, particularly in a carrier, small ships, can absolutely decimate large ships and occasionally stations. So if you have them set to the proper fleet to target large ships as opposed to intercept, which is only small, then it actually helps quite a bit. And those are kind of worth it to me to maintain just because they can absolutely decimate a KRNL. Other than that, I don't really care for anything that requires ammunition. And that's where a lot of, like I was saying, with preferences comes in. So if we go to the batteries, this is all the large ship batteries. I was actually under the misconception that the Rattlesnake dealt more damage than the Terran, and that is not the case. It is not even close to the case. It is a significant difference in favor of the Sin for this particular ship, particularly since the Sins tend to be more tanky. The only real thing that the Rattlesnake has going for it over the Sin is that it's a bit more maneuverable and quite a bit faster. The Sin has more firepower, obviously, and can take more incoming fire with the extra shields. Now, the Terran has an annotation here because the Terran main battery can go on both the Sin and the Osaka. And then the Ray has a bit of an annotation here because it has the lowest DPS significantly. And it's blue because it's the only one that focuses more on one than the other. All the rest are even. But it is definitely shield heavy, significantly shield heavy, almost twice as much. But it does have the longest range, and it has a massive slowdown effect on it that if you can get some rays to stagger on a capital ship, you can basically keep it in place while everybody just destroys it. Very good for fleet play, kind of shaky for player play, but I mean, preference and all that. If that's your deal, then I will not judge you for it. As far as ARG, Paranid, Split, Teladi, and Terran go, I also threw in the non-specifics for all of them, just so that we can see how their stuff stacks up against them. The Boron are obviously only the Boron because they cannot use anybody else's equipment, including the general equipment. So in this particular case, unsurprising to anyone at this point, the missiles mostly dominate. The Argon Ion Blaster has massive DPS, but if you look at the ratio of shield to hull damage, it's almost all shield. So it's dealing 838 damage to shield per shot, but only 12 to hull. So if you could stagger that with something like down here where it deals mostly hull damage, then it could be a good trade-off. You have one shield breaker and then 4 hull damagers. The problem is, if you look at the difference in the ratio, 0.6 is definitely not equivalent to 69.8. So while, yes, this damages hull more than shield, it's only 30 points more, as opposed to 800 points more. So I feel like you're going to have a hard time with this. This would probably be more useful for pirating, where you want to take their shield out and deal only 50% of their hull damage until they start bailing, until there's nobody left on the ship so you can claim it. I could see making a Burst Ray / Argon Ion Blaster combo work for pirating, at least small and mediums, but I really, really don't think, even with that high DPS, that it's going to be particularly useful as far as combat goes. Now here's where I don't just want the highest raw damage, because the Shard Battery wins. As far as I don't want to use ammunition, and I actually want to kill things. Green damage, the Shard Battery is the highest, but its range is so small. 3.7 kilometers, you're going to be right up in their face. And it is, it's more of a shotgun. I would take the hit on damage to go to the Plasma Cannon. My problem with the Plasma Cannon is its travel speed. So it goes 0.983 kilometers per second, but it has a range of 6.5 kilometers. So you're looking at almost 7 seconds before you hit something at max range. That's an awful lot of time for a ship to move, especially when you only fire 1 every 3 seconds. 0.333, which is a third, shots per second. So every 3 seconds you fire a shot. Like that's a hell of a miss. The bolt repeater, in particular case of the Argon specific or neutral, would probably be my pick, just because it's the highest damage with a reasonable speed, a reasonable range, and a reasonable refire rate. So a couple of misses really aren't going to hurt you that bad. The beam emitters look great because of how much damage they deal, but their refire rate is absolutely atrocious, dragging their DPS way down into the dumpster. I don't understand why some people recommend them, particularly as turrets, because it's still, even if you take the cooldown stuff out of it, their refire rate alone just makes them not really worth it. But that's, again, opinion based. If you like them, no shame, you do you. I just want to show the numbers and what we get out of them. Now, as far as the small ships go, I lean much more towards the blast mortar. The downside to that is the fire rate, the movement speed and range. The range is a little small. I'm more likely to lean towards the bolt repeater again, even though it's significantly less damage, just because a couple of misses aren't going to absolutely destroy you. But the blast mortar is a very real possibility. The other thing to remember is it's purple, so it does AoE damage. Now, in a small ship, if you're up in something's face and you hit too close, that AoE damage might splash onto you. Or if you have a fleet going out with them, there's a very real potential that you're going to damage your own ships with that blast radius. So you have to be a little cautious as far as that goes. But also, if there's a big old fleet of them and you launch some blast mortars into it, you're going to damage more than one ship in a go, which makes the DPS significantly higher still. Looking at the Boron ships, now remember, all the Boron ships have a slowing effect, or Boron ships, all of the Boron weapons have a slowing effect attached to them, to varying degrees. Some of them are stronger than others. I didn't bother to include a column for that. I probably should have, but it is what it is. Again, looking here, I'm more inclined to take that over that, because yes, this is shield heavy. The Ion Pulse Railgun, it is definitely shield heavy. It's 1420 to 920. 1.5 in favor of shields, but the next highest for Borons is going to be the phase cannon, which is 103 as opposed to 265, and I feel like the difference there is greater than the 1.5 difference here. So I feel like you would get more even hull DPS out of this, and we can see that yes, in fact, you do get more hull DPS, and it's got the math involved too. So you would get 208 hull DPS as opposed to the 103 on the phase cannon. However, the railgun has the same problem that the plasma cannons do, so you don't want to load up with just those, you kind of want a mix of the two. And then with the smalls, we're looking at probably the Argon. It's got a decent refire, has a very short range, but it's got a very high speed. And also, it is shield heavy, but not nearly as bad as the next one up, which is the Ion Gatling, is extremely shield heavy. So I feel like even it's slightly higher DPS, but it's actually better DPS as far as hull and shield go. Your shield, you're going to beat them out with the Ion Gatling, but the hull is definitely going to beat them out with the Arc Gun. And since it's still shield heavy, you may as well just slap a bunch of those on your small ships and call it good. Or if you don't mind dealing with the missiles, that's an option too. If you want to deal with the ammunition, the DPS difference is real. Dumbfire are usually the highest, but remember they don't lock on. Tracking obviously locks on, but it's going to be less DPS. And then your torpedoes, they're slow. They're very slow. But when they hit like freight trains. That's why we generally load up a group to destroy capital ships with them. Paranids only actually have one special weapon, as opposed to the general weapons, and that's the mass driver. Now, it's one that doesn't aim itself, and I believe you have to charge it as well. I could be wrong on that fact. I don't actually use the mass driver at all. I feel like, again, the bolt repeater is actually higher DPS anyway. The Paranid's kind of got the shit end of that stick, but, you know, it is what it is. And then the same with the bolt repeater or the blast mortar as far as the smalls go. Again, their only specific weapon is so far down the list that why would you even consider it? Unless you wanted specifically Paranid weapons. I suppose I shouldn't be facetious. Some of you might be interested in that. The split boson lance, massive DPS, but again, doesn't aim. It is, I believe, according to the description, it says it's twice the damage of the other boson lance. You have to charge it up, and it doesn't aim. So you basically have to get right on top of stuff and take it out that way. Well, I guess not right on top. You can snipe with it. 7k. That's reasonable for medium ship. But I don't like the manual aim. There's too much room for things to go wrong. I'm not a good enough player to consistently get those shots off, so it's not something that I'm interested in. I'm probably, again, going to go for the Neuron. The split neutron Gatling cannon is actually better than the bolt repeater by a significant amount, by about 30 DPS, or close to, well, 25 DPS, which, I mean, 5 damage a second adds up, right? And then again, we're looking at the blast mortar or the neutron Gatling as opposed to the bolt repeater, again, for the split, because they're split. The Teladi have a charging weapon specialty, and I really don't like charging weapons. I never have, even back when I used to play first-person shooters with Halo and whatnot. Anything that you have to charge, I have no interest in. Very similar to things that I have to worry about ammunition in this game. So again, we're looking at, for my preference, the bolt repeater, or the bolt repeater or the blast mortar for the smalls. The blast mortars are only available on small ships. The Terrans get some fun toys, though, because they're Terrans, so of course they do. The Proton Barrage has some serious DPS. Not quite as much as the Blast Mortar, but it is more than the Bolt Repeater. So that's exciting. And it's significantly more than the Bolt Repeater. It's, 36 more? Which is even better than the Split Weapon, at least on the small. And then on the mediums, again, still better by even more. You're looking at almost 50 difference there. If we look at the overall, because I am not particular, I will pick and choose. I will cherry pick from all of the factions, because almost every one of my saves I build up to be traders in the beginning to get the recipes that I want for maximum outgoing damage, and then I cherry pick what I want, and then we go from there. So in this particular case, looking at the medium ships, probably going to go with the Terran Proton Barrage, because it does seem to be the highest as far as that goes, outside of things that require ammo or have other reasonable, like charging or other issues that I don't want to deal with. Then we have, for the smalls, blast mortars or the Terran Proton Barrage again for the overalls, if you're just after damage and low maintenance. If you don't mind the maintenance, obviously some of these other things are going to be worth it. I don't know how well the NPCs deal with these guys. I'm assuming not well, but I could be wrong. I mean, without a system combat being 100% chance to hit with primaries, it might be worth loading up a fleet with the Boson Lances just to see how they do, because that is a whole lot of DPS. Maybe we'll give it a try in our Boron playthrough. We'll throw a couple of small ships with some Boson, or medium ships with some Boson Lances, see how they do. I mean, it's worth a shot. But overall, for player base at least, I know what I would pick. Hopefully, this will show you what you would pick as well. Ultimately, which weapon is right for you is a question that only you can answer. I do hope, though, that this has given you some tools to make an educated decision at the very least. If this is something that you guys liked and are interested in, I will gladly do one for the turrets as well. This did take quite a bit of research, math, time, and consideration. So if you are interested, I'll do it for the turrets. But if you're not, then let's not waste either one of our time. I'm probably going to do something similar for turrets for myself, but I don't want to take the time to do a video if it's not something you guys are interested in. But again, if you are interested in, I will absolutely do it. If you guys learned anything useful today, or if you had a good time, please don't be afraid to drop a like. If you're feeling friendly, maybe go ahead and subscribe. But either way, have a fantastic rest of your day, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for watching.